I'm Zoe Delahunty-Light, and I'm here to explain to you what all those keywords and terms and concepts in Diablo 4 actually mean. This video is meant for those of you for whom Diablo 4 might be your very first Diablo game, as boy, there are a lot of definitions to learn and internalize so that you can understand what they actually do, and I'm here to help you out. The end of the video covers every affix elite enemies have and what they mean, by the way, so if you want to skip there, then be my guest. I've also included chapters for those of you who want to skip to a specific section because I'm nice like that. First, let's talk about keywords and terms that affect you, the player. I'm going to try to make this interesting to listen to, but trust me, there's a lot of information I've got to get through, so bear with me. Understanding key terms when it comes to skills is important, as a lot of ability descriptions and item perks will buff your basic and core skills, which are different from each other. A basic skill is one that deals damage and is always available to cast, so it doesn't consume any resources to use it. These will be the ones you can unlock in the first node of your skill tree in Diablo 4. Core skills are ones that require resources to use and deliver more powerful attacks. Your resource will be called different things depending on your class. So, for example, for necromancers your resource is called essence, and for barbarians it's fury. A more specific description for some items is used, called channeled abilities. Channeled abilities are ones which can continue for as long as you hold their assigned hotkey and have resources to do so, meaning they can basically be cast non-stop. Moving on to damage and staying alive, the major keywords here are healthy and injured. Healthy means you have more than 80% of your life, not that you're at full life, which is an easy mistake to make. Injured means you have less than 35% of your maximum life. To stay alive for longer, you may have items that generate a barrier around you when hit. Barrier is a passive ability that can be unlocked and triggered by specific items, normally armor. Barriers are very hard to miss when they appear, and absorb damage from all sources, so you want to stay inside them for as long as they're around. Barrier generation is a separate passive skill that can be found in skills and items. It increases the amount of barrier generated from your barrier effects, but you have to have an item equipped that creates a barrier in the first place for this barrier generation to be of any use. Life on kill / life regeneration is pretty self-explanatory. You get life in return for killing an enemy, or regenerate life over time. However, taking damage disables life regeneration for 4 seconds, something to bear in mind. Thorns is a fantastic name, but a confusing one if you don't know what it means. Having a high amount of thorns, usually on armor, means that you deal damage to attackers when hit by their direct attacks. They are literally thorns, punishing enemies for attacking you. Mind you, thorn damage doesn't apply to attacks that are entirely damage over time. Fortified is a status that means you take 10% reduced damage. This status applies when you become fortified, meaning you have more fortify than current life. You can keep track of your fortify easily by taking a look at your health orb. When you see a red overlay appear on top of it, that indicates your current amount of fortify. Leveling is an obvious one. For each level, you get more powerful. Duh. But another added effect of levels is that for each level, enemies gain a certain amount of visible damage reduction, as in, the damage you deal is lessened. So for example, 47% of the damage you deal is reduced if you're at level 32. Lucky hit, critical hit, and critical strike chance are easy to confuse. Lucky hit means you have a certain percentage of chance to instantly kill enemies as long as they're below 35% life when you damage them. Lucky hits cannot be triggered against champions, elites, bosses, or players. Critical hit and critical strike chance is more damage-centered than instant death-centered. Basically, you have a chance to critically strike enemies based on the items you have equipped and your level. A critical strike is one of massively increased damage, so, for example, a level 32 necromancer's critical strike deals 60% extra damage. Overpower is the last damage-based keyword I'm gonna explain, and it's one of the terms that's really tricky to straight up guess. Overpower refers to the fact that when you cast a skill, it has a chance to overpower all the damage it deals. What that means is that it deals bonus damage based on the sum of your current life and fortified life, which I just explained. Overpower damage has a base value of 50%. Damage over time, passive abilities, and channeled skills can't overpower though. Your chance to overpower can't be increased, but it can be guaranteed by special effects on certain items. Okay, so now we're done with player keywords, let's move on to status effects because Diablo 4 has so many. Chilled enemies have reduced movement speed. Repeatedly chilling an enemy will freeze it, and frozen enemies can't move or attack. Dazed enemies can't attack or use skills, but they are able to move. Immobilized enemies can't move, but are still able to attack and use skills, so immobilized is the opposite of dazed. Enemies affected by fear will attempt to run away from player characters. When you see a skull above enemies or yourself, that's an indication that you're being affected by fear. Immune enemies can't be damaged at all, and all control impairing effects are removed and prevented. Slowed enemies move at a reduced speed, and taunted enemies are forced to attack the target that taunted them. Knockbacked enemies are forcibly repositioned and pushed back. Knocked down is subtly different. Knocked down enemies are unable to act and are pinned to the ground, which briefly paralyzes them. Stun is also very similar to knockback and renders enemies unable to act. Okay, so stagger is really important when it comes to bosses. Below their health bar, you'll be able to see a thin gold line, which is the stagger bar. As bosses in Diablo 4 can't be crowd controlled, instead they are able to be staggered. You fill up the stagger bar by targeting the boss with ineffectual crowd control skills that, yes, are kind of useless in regards to their essential function. Use enough of them though, and the stagger bar will fill up, and the boss will be rendered staggered once it's full. The gold bar beneath their health then turns into a green bar, which runs out over a short period of time. When the green bar runs out, the boss goes back to normal. Finally, vulnerable enemies have their health bar highlighted in purple and take 20% increased damage. You can also become vulnerable yourself, so watch out for the purple cracks appearing on your health container. I've talked about the effects that target enemies, so now it's time to talk about the enemies themselves, as there's a fair few subtypes you should really know. First off, you'll see skills often refer to close and distant enemies. These may sound self-explanatory, but the most important thing is that Diablo 4 is a lot more generous with what counts as a distant enemy than you'd think. Close enemies are those within melee range, whereas distant enemies are those outside of melee range. Champions appear in Nightmare difficulty, otherwise known as World Tier 3. To start off, you can only play on World Tier 1 or 2 and have to unlock Tier 3, so you don't really have to worry about champions for a while. Champions emit a purple glow and are stronger than normal enemies, with a damage-reducing aura that makes them a pain to kill, especially as that aura also affects nearby monsters, meaning anything that they spawn or bring with them are super resilient to damage too. Elites are mini-bosses. They usually have certain affixes that grant them extra powers and effects, which I'll explain in a couple of seconds. In endgame, elite enemies can have up to 4 of these affixes at a time, including terms like TEMPEST, Teleporter, VAMPIRIC. The list goes on and on and on, and I will explain each one right now. Chilling Wind summons a wall of ice wind around the elite in question. You'll take chill damage if you pass through the wind wall. Cold Enchanted elites attack with cold damage, meaning that if you get too close you'll receive cold damage, and chill, meaning that you can be frozen if you're not careful. Explosive elites summon fireballs that explode for fire damage, which can culminate in players being burned, where fire damage is dealt over time. Fire Enchanted elites shoot 3 fireballs in random directions, and upon dying, these Fire Enchanted elites release 3 more waves of fireballs. Real kind of them. Frozen elites summon ice pillars that will chill all areas around them and can explode, causing frozen damage to players. HELLBOUND elites summon totems that slow you and bind you to a location so you won't be able to escape. Lightning enchanted elites let loose lightning bolts and lightning orbs when hit. Mortar elites shoot 4 fire projectiles up into the air which then hit the ground. These are fairly easy to avoid as their area of impact will be marked on the ground, so all you need to do is get out of the way. MULTISHOT elites hit players with projectiles that split into 3. PLAGUEBEARER elites generate a pool of poison upon their death which will explode shortly after. Poison enchanted elites deal non-stop poison damage and also produce a pool of poison upon being hit. Just like PLAGUEBEARER elites, they also create a pool of poison upon death. Shadow enchanted elites can summon a clone for a few seconds. Damaging the clone doesn't affect the elite's overall health, so spend your resources wisely. Summoner elites come with up to 6 minions at a time who have more HP and attack power than regular enemies. Suppressor elites cover themselves with massive barriers which makes it impossible to hit them from afar, meaning you almost always have to resort to melee. Teleporter elites are a pain in the arse and can move to any area nearby, creating a massive electrical field whenever they do so. TEMPEST elites can use multiple ice spikes to pull you closer within range of their melee attacks. Terrifying elites cast 2 pentagrams on the floor which activate after a few seconds, and if you're caught standing in them, you'll be afflicted with fear and will be forced to briefly flee. Vampiric elites are fairly easy to understand. They drain health from you with each successive attack, which will heal them in return. And finally, Waller elites will trap you within rocky summoned walls, which can be broken if you hit them enough. Okay, I'm done. If there's anything else you think might be helpful for beginners in Diablo 4 to know, let me know in the comments. And if you've made it this far, thanks so much for watching, and make sure you subscribe to Eurogamer and like this video for more videos from yours truly, as we have a new video out almost every single day. Now, I'm going to go and hang out with my iron golem, so I'll see you lot next time.